Hello, and thank you all so much for coming out tonight. I'd like to start with a moment of silence so that we might remember the victims and the heroes who lost their lives on this day, September 11th, 18 years ago. So please join me. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to the Easthampton Telecommunications Advisory Committee public hearing. My name is Paul St. Pierre. I am the chairperson of this committee, and it is my great joy to share with you the fantastic work our committee has done. More importantly, we are here to listen to your thoughts and collect your feedback regarding the state of broadband internet access within our community. Our agenda this evening is as follows. We will have a brief recap of the work done to date by the Telecom Advisory Committee, a presentation on the results of a survey which we had great success with earlier this year, and lastly, and most importantly, our public speak is an opportunity for everyone to come and have their voice heard. Before we move onto the first agenda item, though, I would like to thank Jason Miranda, who is the vice chair of this committee, Kevin Mulligan, our clerk, Thomas Peak, city councilor, and the rest of our committee, Harry Schumann, who unfortunately is not with us tonight, as well as Stan Diamond, Patricia Hawkins, Dan Gilbert, and Tom Malsbury. Thank you guys. You're an awesome team, and I'm so proud to be part of this group. I was going to thank, they're not here today, but our lovely mayor, Nicole LaChapelle, and our city council, who have all been actually very supportive of this mission from the beginning. And so thank you to them if they are watching at home. And finally, I'd like to thank Easthampton Media, who is here filming this event. This will be available for streaming online at their website and also on their YouTube channel, which I hear is the way to go. So moving on. The Easthampton Telecommunications Advisory Committee was established in the summer of 2018 to study actions the city might take to ensure the provision of affordable, high-quality internet access to Easthampton residents. Having access to reliable, high-speed broadband internet is absolutely vital to the modern home and business. Technology has changed the way we live. People connect with more devices than ever before, devices which are dependent on internet functionality to improve our quality of life. For that reason, it is in our common interest to ensure affordable, universal access to the best possible internet for all of our businesses and friendly neighbors. So what does our market look like today in Easthampton? Right now, most Easthampton residents receive internet from either Charter or Verizon. No company has a legal monopoly, but we do have, in this case, what is called a natural monopoly. A natural monopoly is a market phenomenon which occurs when it is not economically practical to engage in market competition. For instance, you wouldn't build a train track next to another train track, but they did build our national fiber optic internet backbone next to the train tracks. It is a network which extends across our country, under the oceans, across the globe, and all the way back to Easthampton, Massachusetts, where a pure fiber signal is pumped into copper cables several miles away from our homes. So what are other cities doing to make sure their residents have access to the best possible internet? We have spoken with and consulted with Westfield, which operates its own telecom provider called Whip City Fiber. Westfield, several years ago, took the initiative to build a small number of fiber optic internet connections directly to homes and offer it as a utility. The response was very positive, which led them to expand the network, reinvest their earnings, and at this point, I believe they have well surpassed 70% coverage of the entire city. Representatives from Whip City Fiber say they have exceeded their market share targets in every area of installation. We also spoke with Holyoke Gas and Electric. Similarly to Westfield, they had a pre-existing gas and electric utility. The difference with Holyoke is that they decided to serve only business customers, at least at this time. We also visited with and consulted with Greenfield, a city which has some similarities to Easthampton. Greenfield built a very cool and very unique broadband network. They run fiber optic cables along their utility poles, and from there connect to homes wirelessly using encrypted Wi-Fi transmitters. Like Easthampton, Greenfield did not have a pre-existing power utility, but they were able to build a citywide broadband network from the ground up with fewer than 10 people on staff. We also spoke with a private company which partners with public entities to install and operate broadband networks as public-private partnerships. In this model, a majority of the installation costs could be covered by the private company. However, the network would not be entirely publicly owned, and it may be more expensive for the service. So you may be asking yourself, what is this fiber optic technology this young man keeps talking about? It's actually very simple. Fiber optic cables transfer information using pulses of light along glass fibers as thin as a human hair. This light moves in a vacuum, so it requires no electrical current and generates no heat in order to function. If a fiber cable were to fall down in the road and someone would touch it, they would not be harmed. It will not start a fire in your home, and it has substantial advantages over copper and competing wireless technologies with regard to speed, reliability, latency improvements, bandwidth, and beyond. As I mentioned before, our nationwide internet backbone is the grid. It comprises what we think of as the internet, and which makes all of these connections possible. It was built using fiber optic cables. However, this network does not extend to our homes. To bring the internet connection to the household, big telecom providers came up with a way to use previously installed copper cable phone wires to carry an internet signal as well. This is called last mile service. The problem is, copper cables are not suited for, or at least they were not designed for, transmitting internet connection data. But we've used them for several decades with varying degrees of success. What this does do, though, is it creates a bottleneck in data transfer because the copper cables cannot keep up with the national fiber backbone. We have pictures here on the slide. These are some images of what the copper cables look like on the inside. You can see that nice one where that red little LED is lighting up. Most of the new fiber cables are transmit the light using LEDs. So yes, get these. Oh. These are, we found this awesome book, by the way, Fiber. These slides will be up there. We're going to pass it and make these publicly available, but there's some really good information in that book, Fiber, by Suzanne Crawford. So we looked at what existing municipal broadband networks do we have nearby. We actually discovered that our municipal government buildings are all connected already with fiber optic cabling. It goes to our schools, our public safety center, even the public library. Of course, I mentioned Westfield, Greenfield, and Holyoke. We also see that South Hadley has begun the process of building fiber optic network there. Chicopee is having the conversation. Northampton is also moving in that direction. And many hill towns in the area have been able to implement this technology. They're a little different because there is a ton of grant money available for areas with very low population densities. So let's say we decided that we wanted to move forward as a city and wanted to provide a municipal broadband network. What would it take for us to do that? before I get there. Oh, this is not so good on the big screen, but this is a map here, and it shows all of the communities here which have begun installing fiber optic cabling. And if you can see down in the bottom right-hand corner there, that little patch of colored-in towns, we're right in the middle of that. That's Holyoke, Westfield, South Hadley. In the yellow is Northampton. And so where is Easthampton going to be in this? So if we were to move forward and provide a municipal broadband network, the first thing we would need to do is establish a municipal light plant, or MLP. An MLP is a publicly managed nonprofit company which provides utilities to ratepayers. If we want to create an MLP, it costs us nothing at all to do so, but it is absolutely something we must do if at any point in the future our municipal government wants to invest in a broadband infrastructure, in solar or geothermal power generation, or basically any communication or energy-focused utility service whatsoever. If we want to establish a municipal light plant, it requires 2 votes in favor by the City Council in 2 separate fiscal years before going to the voters on the next municipal election ballot. I'm very proud to say our City Council has voted in favor unanimously in both current and the prior fiscal year. So thank you again to the City Council. While the ballot language still must be finalized and approved, we do expect this November our city will have the chance to vote and decide together if this is the future that we want. So now let's address the elephant in the room. If we were to build a municipal broadband network, how much would it cost and how would we pay for it? The most important thing to keep in mind is that public broadband network is revenue generating. So what we are really concerned with is how do we finance the initial build out. Once we have a pilot area connected, revenue from the service can be reinvested and the network can expand naturally over time. We wouldn't have to do it that way, but realistically it would be impractical to expect a full city build out overnight. In all reality, a project of this scale would take years to accomplish. Now, some smaller communities have chosen to pay for fiber networks using property tax increases. The places we've seen do this are places with very low populations, extremely low population density, and in many cases, if not all, qualify for large federal subsidies. Some of the bigger cities we have seen do this have had previously established MLPs with money in the bank and have financed initial build-outs using reserve funds. Westfield is a primary example of that. Another potential option would be the public-private partnership, where the amount of initial investment from the municipality would be very low and primarily related to the make-ready costs of prepping our utility poles so the fiber can be installed. The reality is that most of the communities we have seen which are similar to Easthampton have funded these types of projects using revenue bonds. Revenue bonds are loans repaid with money generated from an infrastructure project. For example, a city might use revenue bonds to pay for a new bridge and repay that bond by charging a toll to use the bridge. Most revenue bonds are 30-year repayment terms with no penalty for early repayment. Now, as a committee, we're an advisory committee. We cannot say how the city would choose to fund this type of project if we did move forward. But what's important to know is that it is absolutely possible and realistic that we could build a citywide, publicly owned broadband network without raising taxes. This concludes the recap. Oh, no, it doesn't conclude. We have one more slide here. A breakdown of our costs. So our upfront costs would include a survey of existing telephone poles. Now that is really important because in order to put out for bid or to truly quote and gauge what the cost will be, we need to have a full telephone pole survey done so that we know the condition and what's going to be required for make-ready costs to prepare them for the installation of the cable. Of course, there is a cost to installing the fiber on the poles and dropping that fiber to homes. One potential partner, which is a private company, it's a for-profit company and has a pretty good reputation, so they're professional. They estimated $12 to $15 million. A comparable community to us that we looked at was they estimated $8 to $10 million. And when we spoke with Whip City Fiber, they looked at our demographics in our town and our mileage, and they also estimated roughly $8 to $10 million in total costs. Again, this would not be an amount that we would ever have to come up with at one time. This would be a revenue-generating service, and it could be built out over time, and those numbers would represent full costs of the entire city. As well, several nearby communities have expressed interest in partnering with us, helping us with maintenance, either customer service, even running the entire network for us if we would want that. And those options may help control costs if we would accept them in the future. So this concludes the recap of the work done to date by the Telecom Advisory Committee. We will now attempt to make your eyes bleed with some very colorful pie charts. I'm going to invite Tom up to the podium, and he will walk you through our survey results. Thank you all very much.
Hi everyone, my name's Tom Peake. I'm the Precinct 3 City Councilor. I'm really excited to be here and talking about this with everyone. This has been sort of a pet project of mine since I was sworn in, and it's something that I'm really excited about. I think we've got a fantastic group together, and you know, we've seen a lot of things that I think I can speak for most of my colleagues when I say, you know, it's been fairly exciting and encouraging for us, but at the end of the day, what we think about this only matters to a certain extent. What really matters is what the voters and the potential future ratepayers would think about this, what their needs are and what their level of interest would be. So to that end, we conducted an online survey over the course of the summer. We had a number of community partners publicize it. We also used the various social media groups for Easthampton to publicize it, and we got a good deal of response for a city our size. I think it's worth mentioning that obviously any results we get from this are not a representative sample of the town, because obviously people who click on this and take the 5 minutes to fill it out are going to be people who, either because they're really excited about it or because they're opposed to it. For whatever reason, these are people who care about this probably more than the average person at this juncture. But I think it is a good representative sample of the sort of people who would probably be the initial customer base if Easthampton were to head in this direction. So I'll just sort of go through the slides quickly and show what we found. So survey respondents, we got 618 total responses. So that's about 1 out of every 30 or so Easthampton residents. Homeowners made up the bulk of the respondents, but about 22% were renters. There were a handful, a very small number of businesses that responded. We actually had a whole list of other questions for businesses, but because the sample size was fairly small, we actually excluded those. And one thing that we hope to do is to work directly with maybe the Chamber of Commerce to do like a more thorough survey of businesses going forward. Current providers, almost everyone, 91%, have Charter Spectrum residential. And then when you count the 2% that has Charter Spectrum business, it's really clear. There are other options. Some people use DSL. Some people have just used their cellular data. But really, out of the people who responded, the vast majority are getting their internet right now from Charter Spectrum. So we asked people how satisfied they are with their current internet on a scale of 1 to 5, so 0 was not an option here. So 2.94 was the average score, so there were some people who were pretty happy, there were some people who were pretty unhappy. I think that there was a lot of people who felt, sort of okay about it, but yeah, that we fell just a little bit short of the median here for the average, or for what the middle point would be actually for the average satisfaction so far from the people who responded. Bundled services. This actually surprised me. 46% of respondents only have internet. The other 54% bundle some other sort of service. This is important when we're looking at the viability of this market because, and we've seen this when we've talked to other communities that have done this. If you're trying to get somebody who's currently subscribing to internet services somewhere else to switch, one area where they might be a little bit hesitant is if they end up having like a bundled package with TV and phone, and switching over would mean that they'd pay a little bit more for those things. Now, if you talk to the various municipal broadband providers, they have all sorts of ways that they've like strategies that they've set up to get around that, helping people set up with Roku or YouTube TV or whatnot, and actually having like tech support to facilitate that transition. But it still is definitely a hurdle if you want to say, could this be a viable service in town? So I was actually surprised by the number of people who don't bundle any of their services and get everything, they just have internet. Internet activities. You'll note this doesn't add up to 100% because you could pick multiple things. So obviously general use is just about everyone. Streaming video was probably a bigger thing than I think at least I anticipated, and I think that that's probably true for a lot of people. But internally we've talked about it, and that is becoming an increasingly popular way for people to stay in touch with family in other parts of the country, and also for business, for meetings and whatnot. So yeah, streaming video is really important, and it is one of the areas where latency can really complicate things. So that was an interesting thing to know. Out of the people who responded, a lot of people did at least some work from home. And that was also interesting. In the professional environment, that's becoming an increasingly popular thing that you see. I know that my work lets me work from home every Thursday, so I think there's probably a lot of people that are in similar positions. And then you have web applications, video conferencing, voice calling, online gaming. I actually expected that to be a larger percentage of our respondents, but it's there for sure. Total devices. This is another interesting thing. When you actually think about it, this isn't super surprising, but it's crazy to me. The majority of 50% of people have either 6 to 10 devices or more than 10 devices. So we're coming into an era where it's not like your family just has your desktop computer set up in the study. There's like a lot of people have their phones, they have their tablets. There's even like home appliances are often connected to the internet at this point, and all of that is sort of increasing the amount of demand for these things, the amount that which are our internet infrastructure is being used, and we frankly expect that to increase over time. That's just an interesting sort of snapshot of where we are. In terms of cutting the cord, I want to return to this point because it is seen as one of the bigger sort of market hurdles that a municipal light plant providing internet has. Out of our respondents, which again are not representative of the whole city, 52% have already cut the cord, while another 38% have said that they've seriously considered it. And while again this isn't totally representative, I know just from looking at some of the data that our partners at Easthampton Media have shared, that because this affects their revenue, that this is a trend that we're actually seeing. Cord cutting is becoming a more and more prevalent thing as time goes on. Yeah, so again, expected difficulty. We're just trying to figure out for people, how difficult do you think it would be to cut the cord if they wanted to? So obviously the people who have done it, most of them said it was pretty easy. Out of the people who hadn't done it, there's a range of answers, but you get the sense that people do think. I'm sorry, sir.
Sorry. When you say cut the cord, do you mean TV or is it something else? I mean, what does that mean?
I think that when people say cut the cord, they tend to be referring to getting away from TV and cable and just going to internet alone. There are. Sure. Yeah. And so obviously there's some degree of concern about it, but there's also a lot of people who think that they could probably pull it off. We talked about service outages, and there's a pretty wide range of responses here. Almost 30% of people said that they had not experienced any outages, and then there's a quarter of people who said that they were experiencing multiple outages per week. So a lot of that might depend on the equipment you've got in your home. It might depend on the neighborhood you're in. It might depend on the connection between, the cable, internet, and your house. There's a lot of factors that can go into this, but there certainly are. There are definitely people who have felt like there have been a good deal, and then there are people who don't feel that way. So it's a pretty diverse range of responses here. We talked about top priorities. This is a really interesting place because when you get into the weeds and start talking to the people who do this stuff, they really feel that speed, that they're trying to maximize speed, trying to maximize the amount of data you can get in. What we found is that price was actually, price and reliability were really the most important things for the people that we were talking to. And that definitely informs a lot of the decisions that the city might make going forward. There are definitely people that would offer these sort of premium speeds, but at prices that might be comparable to or even a little bit higher than what the incumbent providers are looking at. And it's interesting to know that right now price is actually a really a thing that they really care about. One thing that we did find interesting is that latency, which is actually the sort of technical factor that often leads to sort of delays and in how things can either stream or upload, download quickly. That was very low on people's list, but we think that that might have to do with levels of knowledge about the actual terminology. Paul, do you want to say something?
I just also want to comment about latency. Latency is extremely important to the business world. There is so much equipment coming out and new technology coming out which requires a fiber connection because of the advantages in latency, particularly in manufacturing and in medical imaging equipment. At some point, it will be absolutely mandatory for businesses to have a fiber connection because of the latency specifically.
Yeah, thank you. So then, the real question that we wanted to ask is, if we were to do this as a city, would you consider switching? So 73% of the people who responded said that yes, they would, and another 24% said maybe. There were some who said no. Again, it's important to remember this isn't a perfect sample, but I definitely think it's interesting to note that there's definitely a market for these services. There's definitely interest in the community. And so that is what we got from I mean, there were a lot of other questions that we answered. Those were sort of the things that we thought would be really interesting to share with you guys. So that's what we got out of the survey. I think that there's currently plans for us to publish the full survey somewhere on the city website so that people can really get into it themselves. But that is basically what we wanted to share. And with that, if the chair is okay with this, I'd make a motion to open public speak.
Of course. Yeah. So we're going to turn the floor over to you guys. Keep in mind, we're unable to respond directly to any questions or comments you may have in this format. We're here purely to take feedback and listen to what you have to say. Please be respectful and try to, well, limit your time to 5 minutes or less so everyone can have a chance to talk. When you come to the podium, please begin by stating your name and your address. Again, this meeting is being recorded by Easthampton Media, and it will be available for your review on their website or YouTube channels.
Peg Conniff, 35 Pine Hill Road. I am also a city councilor, full disclosure. Thank you guys for taking care of this, the research, the data, the hard work. Really, we really appreciate it. I think this is something that we need an answer to, and we need to know where we're going. So I appreciate all the work that you guys have done. I know that I'm not supposed to ask questions and you can't respond because I've been on that side, but I'm going to throw them out, and perhaps you can respond in another venue. And maybe somebody else here has the same question. So you talked about a municipal light plant, and I saw on the slide that there would be a board with members. Just don't have to answer. Who populates that board? Are they community members? Do they come from here? Would these people, and then secondarily to that, the support for this, would that be something that you would then, the support people, would they become employees of the city? And would they have offices here? And would they be someone we can go to for support? Or is it a phone number? And then the other question I have, you kept talking about financing and that the MLP would somehow be revenue generating, and I'm not really clear on that. And the timing of having it in place and starting to generate revenue before we do the financing and what that would look like. Not really clear on that, so I'd be interested in more information about how the revenue gets generated, at what rate, and how all of that comes together, I think would be important. And the last thing I have, which I was going to ask you, Tom, is you had the question up there of how likely are you to switch? And there was yes, no, maybe, and other. I'm just deeply concerned about what other would be. But those are all my questions. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Eli Damon, 14 Ward Avenue, and it's obvious that you guys did a lot of work and were very thoughtful about it, and I appreciate that. So in the first presentation, the only time you mentioned how you would get from the street to inside your home would be through a wireless connection, and my understanding is that those are kind of unreliable, and so or at least if it's Wi-Fi, I don't know, maybe there's some other kind of wireless connection that's not Wi-Fi that's more reliable. I don't know, but I'm wondering how you would get from the street to inside your home.
Thank you very much.
Specific questions that were covered in the presentation, or?
I don't believe we can respond to any questions, no.
Okay.
Hi, Jen Ramsey, Executive Director, Easthampton Media. I have a 3-minute spiel. Municipal broadband networks are being considered and implemented all over the country. This committee is forward-thinking and preparing for the next generation of technology that will empower our citizens and businesses. Personally, I fully support breaking up ISP monopolies, giving residents a choice of internet providers, generating local revenue, and having some accountability and local control of our communications infrastructure. Easthampton Media is your community media center. We run what's known as the Public Education and Government Access Channel, or PEG Access, channels 191, 192, and 193 over Charter Spectrum TV in Easthampton. Our channels are a nonpartisan communications platform for our community to share non-commercial content with one another. Everything created through Easthampton Media is also available on our new YouTube channel, including this meeting, which is streaming live. We work with your city to help provide local government transparency through coverage of important town meetings and forums such as this one. We teach audiovisual media production to community members who want to create videos, films, TV shows, podcasts, and tell local stories. We serve the underserved, the artists, activists, nonprofits, local businesses. We produce local content such as video coverage of performances, lectures, and events. There are community media centers all over the nation doing similar work in their local communities. PEG Access started as a grassroots effort to democratize voices in media, giving local people a platform for free speech and information. We're funded, since the 1970s, the FCC and the federal government made it mandatory for cable franchises to provide several local TV channels for public use free of charge, as long as the municipality requests PEG access in the franchise agreement. This mandate is in exchange for big cable companies running their lines on over public rights of way. Easthampton Media is funded by a percentage of that cable TV revenue paid to the city by charter. As you know, people are cord cutting and cable revenues are declining. The cost of doing business continues to rise. On top of that, the FCC just passed a rule in favor of big cable companies that will significantly reduce our funding. Community media centers and PEG stations all around the nation are bracing ourselves to see how this gets implemented. As technology evolves, community media centers are evolving. We're adding new skills to our tool belts and investing in new communications tools. The future holds new media classes, local storytelling and podcasting, events, studio performances, film screenings, a makerspace, streaming more content live on the internet in addition to our TV channels. There's a lot of potential for the organization if we have funding. I'm here tonight to say that a municipal broadband network would use public rights of ways as the communications, similar to cable franchises. It seems a natural fit to support Easthampton Media with some of the revenues you generate with your municipal internet if you were to put that into place. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Quite a rowdy crowd. All right. Well, I suppose that concludes our meeting. Would we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Anyone second? All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you all so very much for coming.
Thank you.